Hey everyone, I'm Dan, and welcome to Dan Berkery Drums, a YouTube channel where I share practice tips, transcriptions, and exercises that have helped me improve my drumming and musicianship, which I hope will in turn help you with yours. Today I want to share a Max Roach solo transcription that I've been working on for a while. From the classic recording of Ray Noble's Cherokee from Max Roach and Clifford Brown's Study in Brown record. There are so many incredible gems of vocabulary in this solo that I wanted to go through and highlight a few of them and show you ways that you might be able to infuse them into your improvisation practice. There's obviously merit to learning something completely by ear, but I've found that I tend to retain information better when I both transcribe it and write it down on paper and force myself to memorize that transcription without reading the transcription every time I practice. There's this catch-22 of like, if all you do is write everything down and don't sit down and actually try to play with the record and find a way to internalize and memorize a transcription, then transcribing can just be like an exercise rather than like an actual way to build technique around the instrument, vocabulary, your awareness of sound, all these kinds of things. For me, it's always been a way of going directly to the source for vocabulary and then a deeper listening exercise because I'm forced to listen so closely, like probably closer than I would ever listen in passing, just by putting a record on and playing along with it. Because then I'm assuming that I already know what to play. If you listen to something enough times, you're going to innately start to pick up things that you hear, and that's a much more organic approach, for sure. I'm also not an auditory learner first. I have to like build my auditory memory from other sources of information. By building a visual cue for myself, by knowing what things look like on paper, I can kind of connect what I'm hearing to what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling. So this is just what's worked for me, and it's always helped me to deepen my understanding of this instrument and to build my vocabulary. So the first thing is form of the song. That's the most important thing. The form of the song is AABA with 16 measure phrases in each section. So when you're going about memorizing something like this, you could just try to sit here and listen to the song on repeat, and you might memorize it. But for me, the best way to memorize it is in chunks. So I started with 8 measure chunks of this solo. So I would start with this first lick around the toms. That's the first 8 bars. I would just repeat that 8 bars ad nauseum. What ends up happening is you start to hear the entire phrase as one chunk of the solo, especially when you start working on transitions from the first 8 bars to the second 8 bars. So the second 8 bars, that 8 bars, what I would do is try to learn each of them separately, and then together, that's the first A section of the solo. The best thing to do is to make a little loop of each of them. And if you have to look at the paper first, what you've written down, that's fine. But at a certain point, you want to be able to try to memorize in 4 measure chunks, then 8 measure chunks, then 16 measure chunks, and then go through the entire solo that way. Rudiments are a really helpful way to memorize this kind of stuff because throughout this entire solo, if you assign a rudiment to a specific accent pattern, is just a way for you to internalize that phrase a little bit better. There are a couple examples. The first one would be at the top of the last A section, about 4 minutes and 40 seconds in. Starts on the double right hand, but still, it's mostly paradiddles, right? So
That's all paradiddles. When you play a paradiddle, whatever subdivision it is, it's always going to be 4 strokes. Even going beyond that, into the 5th and the 6th bar of that phrase, we're playing paradiddles for that whole thing. That's the sticking that I'm using for the entire thing. It's just where my hands are on the drums changes a little bit. That melody inside of the paradiddles is what's changing, but I know for a fact if I keep my hands playing paradiddles, I'm going to get to the end of that 6-bar phrase. So another good example of how rudiments can help you connect these phrases is the final 4 measures. We have 2 paradiddle diddles and 2 double paradiddles just to negotiate that phrase that Max plays. So let's check it out. When I was trying to figure that out, I started with just all single strokes, and it's impossible to negotiate that. To like get around the drums efficiently that way, ergonomically, without crossing sticks and stuff. If you're trying to play single strokes and get around the drums at that tempo and not play like ridiculously loud, having the paradiddle rudiment to get you through that is only going to make it easier. And honestly, when you watch him play in any of those videos, it's clear that there's a lot of diddles and double strokes happening. Always be thinking about how can you make this make sense as soon as possible. The other thing is, I don't know what sticking Max Roach used on this. It's an audio recording from a very long time ago, but I know that at that tempo, watching videos of Max play, I know that he didn't really ever cross his limbs all that much. So I'm just trying to think of it ergonomically. How do I make this music that I'm hearing make sense to me? It doesn't have to be exactly however Max played that phrase physically. This could be how he played the top of that third A section. But to me, at that tempo, it's almost 400. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 380 beats per minute. Do I know for a fact that this is exactly what Max played stick for stick on each of these sections? Absolutely not. But I'm trying to make it make sense for me and for my hands and for my way of negotiating the instrument. All that really matters at the end of the day is that I'm playing the phrase. I'm playing the musical phrase that I'm hearing on the recording. So use rudiments to make sense of these phrases and connect them where necessary. And it's just a way to help you internalize all this stuff without having to think. You don't want to be thinking when you're trying to work on this kind of vocabulary. You want it to be in your body. You want it to be in your hands when you're given the opportunity to play it.
This stage is also where I'll pull trickier phrases out of the solo, meditate on them, try to work on them in a vacuum to really understand them on their own. For instance, this 5/3 phrase in the second half of the bridge. I wanted to fully understand what Max was playing here, so here's a demonstration of the polyrhythm by itself. I used the app Polynome to write out these specific rhythms. Here is 5/3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now here's the rhythm of the full 2-bar phrase that Max plays. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. I spent a long time just working on that little 2-bar chunk rhythmically. So then I went through and practiced that phrase 3 different ways. Play the left hand quarter notes, right hand playing the phrase, that rhythm. Then the feet playing quarter notes and the hands playing single strokes through that entire phrase. And finally with the full orchestration with the metronome. But once I get to around 150 beats per minute, it starts to get really hard to hear the quarter note pulse underneath this polyrhythm, because it's a lot of rhythmic information coming at you all at once. When I reach this point, I tried a different approach to get the phrase up to tempo. I programmed a metronome in Logic to play this rhythm. Then I worked on playing the phrase over this custom click. By removing the quarter note pulse and focusing on where the 5/3 polyrhythm lands with the quarter note pulse rather than all the pulses in between, I'm able to free up a little bit of brain space to focus on playing 5, 5, and 4/8 notes. So after I've dissected each little phrase, I want to try to play the entire solo in context just to understand how they all feel together. But in order to do that, I need to be able to slow the solo down. To do this, I like to use an app like Amazing Slowdowner. You can find ways to not alter pitch and do it in a DAW that you use. A lot of people think that you'll miss the nuance of the solo at the full tempo if you practice it slower, and I totally understand that criticism. But for me, I'd rather slow the solo down and know for sure that I'm playing what Max is playing exactly with that push and pull that he has than simply a metronome clicking 50 beats per minute slower than the final tempo. By slowing the solo down, I'm forced to hear the nuance of Max's phrasing, exactly what drums he's hitting, how hard he's hitting, and the push and pull of the time. Later on, when I'm improvising, I will certainly use the metronome. But when I'm still in checking my memory mode, I want the safety net of referencing the original recording.
Once you're at this stage, a way to get this deeper into your muscle memory is to improvise back and forth with the transcription. So you're almost like trading the transcription with your own improvisation. So what you're going to be doing is you'll play 8 or 16 bars of the transcription, then 8 to 16 bars improvising and back and forth with each section. And what you can do in the beginning stages is just take one section of the transcription and trade that one section with yourself. So then you would go through the entire solo like that, with one little 8-bar phrase at a time, improvise for 8 bars, transcription for 8 bars, improvise for 8 bars, transcription for 8 bars. It's a way to kind of marry the concept of playing something that you know and improvising. This is nothing new. People have talked about this for a long time. I just think it's a nice reminder that this is okay. You know, like when people disparage transcribing, it's usually because they assume that when someone learns something from a record like this and then writes it down, that that's somehow not allowing you to use your auditory memory to learn vocabulary, or that you're just going to be able to play a lick, one lick in one key if you're a melodic instrument player, or in our case, like you couldn't start a phrase on the and of 1 or on beat 2 instead of beat 1, right? So what improvising off of a transcription will do is force you to think for yourself once you've played a phrase. The next step beyond this would be to sing the melody of Cherokee while playing the transcription, which is really hard. Then can you do it while improvising? And then can you do it trading the transcription and your own improvisation? The whole time singing da 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 da, etc. That's what's going to take all of this stuff to another level, is when you have to introduce not just counting for time's sake, but a melody for musical purposes. And then you won't be counting. If you can sing the melody over this entire song, over this entire transcription, and then over your own improvisation, you're not going to have to count to get to the bridge. You're not going to have to count to know when is a chorus over. It's a great reminder that we're not practicing all this in a vacuum. I have a hard time believing that he's not humming the melody while he's doing this, or at least he's aware of where the chords change at the bridge. You know, he's hearing when that chord change happens. So in order to get ourselves there, we need to start introducing these musical elements into our drummy kind of practice, like learning vocabulary like this. Why not practice this vocabulary with musical form?
Now you can go even deeper with this concept and put piano chords into the piano roll of your DAW, sing the melody while you're hearing the chords that you input, and then trade choruses with the transcription. Try transcribing the trumpet solo or just the rhythms of the piano solo and try to find a way to make that make sense on the drums. This is all extra credit though. So if you can get to that, power to you. This is enough for me to practice for a lifetime. Thanks so much for checking out this video. If you like content like this, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification button so that you're first to know when a new video is released. And I'll see you next time.